As always, make sure that you're actually saving the scene and you're not, you're not just going around and making modifications without doing that, so you don't lose your work. We're going to go in here and we're going to actually Control D to duplicate this, and that's going to be NS Smoke 2, and we can double click to open it. Let me just see. Okay, so there we've got it. To the side, but that's fine. I'll just click that button and then we can see it, right? Okay, now we can drag that in, make sure it's in the center of the world. By the way, the reason why it's so big now as opposed to what it was, what it is on the original scene, it's because it's got a, it's because the scale is now set up to 1 instead of what it was. Now you're also noticing that this is interacting with the environment, which is very interesting, isn't it? And the reason why it's interacting with the environment is because I mean, we don't actually have a tag. So what I mean by this is like if we search for tag, there is no tag added to this mesh, and the tag system comes into fruition whenever you look in here, all the way down. There is, for all of these Niagara fluid sims, there is an option in here where you can add a tag, and whatever you type in there, whatever the name of that tag will be, let's say it's collision, and if you put the tag on the mesh as collision and you have the collision, the tag also in here, then it will know that it's colliding with this mesh or any other mesh that has it, which is quite useful to do. But by default, these are colliding with mesh distance fields. So every mesh in the world of Unreal Engine 5 has a mesh distance field. And well, unless you sort of delete it and you need to generate them again. But because of that mesh distance field, this is allowing the system to collide with it. Now you're seeing here it's not really colliding as much. So the mesh distance fields don't do very well with surfaces that are quite flat like that. So in this particular case, we can type in tag in here. But this is actually, oh, sorry, this might not be, actually, this might not be colliding at all because we don't have a, this doesn't have a, well, it's a spline generated one. So it'd be very interesting to see. So let's just type in collision with double L. It'll be quite interesting to see if this collides. This is an experiment. Let's try it out. So in here, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to add both of these, going to use the same thing, collision, and then I'm also going to add component, just to make sure that at any point, collision is something that it's taken into account. Actually, I can't do it for the array, but that's fine. I can do it for this. So let's see what happens now. If it sort of drops in, the effect will hit the floor. Let's see if it actually collides. And I think not. But then, yeah, I don't think it collides. I don't think it's colliding, and we could drag this down and see, and no, it doesn't seem to be colliding. But if we take it over here, and we bring it up, it still doesn't collide as much. It's still using some distance fields to collide, but it's definitely not at the level that it should be. So now if we select this mesh, and we add a component tag in here, add collisions, I generally do it in both the what you call it, in the actor and also into the component. So now you can see that it's actually colliding with that, which is quite nice. So we can go inside the mesh and you can see here right about now the collision. Okay, so this is a bit unfortunate that it doesn't work for this spline, but I do wonder actually if we edit the blueprint of the blueprint that we've got in here, and let me just go over here like that, select the static mesh, and just see where could I possibly have the option. So is it in here where I could add a tag? Yeah, it seems that there is in here, component tag. Let's do collision, compile, close the blueprint because that's the only thing that I could really do in terms of tags. And let's just see if it actually collides with the floor now. But unfortunately, it is not. I'm going to have to work that one out. But if you really must have some collisions there, what I would advise you to do is, so specifically, if you want to have collisions on that floor, I would add a sort of a rectangular shape and then add a basic material of opacity of 0, so you can't see the material, so it's hidden, if you may, and then that will collide with that. Okay, so this effect is meant to fill up the scene as we, as the whole process, the whole sort of scenario of this scene sort of develops, right? And we could also look at these and add the component tag to them, but because we've, you know, obviously added a few more, none of them will have the collision tag. So that's a bit of a problem because then we're going to have to do it for each of them. But you could effectively, let me just have a look. I mean, you're gonna have to set these sort of tags specifically for all of them. I do believe that you can select multiple ones. Yeah, you can, and then you're able to add the collision tag into these as well. And I think we don't need to do any more collision tags apart from those two that we just had there. So now, obviously, we've got more collisions going on. So what I would do into this sort of simulation in here, reduce the resolution to like 100, so it's really low res. And then in terms of the domain itself, we could do like, let's say 800 in that way, and then 600 by 600, on the sides. For some reason, I can't see the domain, which is a bit of a shame. I can't remember what you needed to do in order to see the domain. I honestly, I have no, I forgot completely how to see the domain bounds. But we now have this falling all the way from here, like that. And I think we're probably going to leave it like that. And now we can go in here and increase the resolution, maybe to a 300 or maybe more. Let's try 500. 500 seems to be quite heavy on the system. So let's not do too heavy of a resolution until we are happy with the scene. And as you can see, the sort of the effect that we're getting is very powerful, and it is sort of occluding the other effect in here, and it's causing some of these artifacts. Now, this is gonna come into fruition where we're going to change some of these things based on, change some of these effects based on how we set up the scene later on with cameras and lighting and all that stuff. But this particular effect, by the way, we could actually we could generate it from here, instead, from the back, and then we can have a look at the wind and say, you know what, I want this to blow quite powerful into the direction of, maybe a bit upwards like that, but definitely quite a bit into this direction, into this direction. Okay, so what that means is that it will collide with the sort of as you can see, it collides with the mesh in here and just flies over. But we can see that the sphere is not big enough for what we're trying to do. So we're going to go in here and make this into, well, we can actually change the size of the entire sphere. So maybe put like a, you can put like a 200. You can see the domain is really large, and you can see what happens there. Quite cool in that respect. But it's kind of cutting off right there, right? So what we can do is we can either do it this way, bring it further like that. The wind is obviously very strong, so that's not helping us too much. But what I can also do is reduce the sphere size to maybe like 100, but then I can increase its size on one of the axes. So maybe do this as a 3, so you can see how sort of like the generator is coming in from like a different method now. And I could put this further down and lift it with the wind. So maybe like 1, so it sort of goes up as the effect sort of blows in. Let's just have a look. Yeah, maybe something like that. But again, it's all about setting up your bounds. So reduce resolution, don't forget about that. Reduce resolution. We don't need this much height, so we could probably go that to 400. But we need the one of the axes. So in this particular case, let's just have a look which one that is. Let's try this at 1,000, and let's see what happens. So it looks like the bounds are still hitting there, so that wasn't it. We can reduce this maybe to about 500, but increase this to 1,200. So now we have a lot more to play with on this side. Yeah, and as you can see, it travels definitely a lot further away. Yeah. Now we can decrease it. Sorry, we can sort of push it down. The resolution is terrible on it though, so we can increase that resolution. And then we can probably look at the density of it is a bit too much. There is also an opacity which we can change, so we could do like a 0.2 of the color, but it only sort of messes with the color, so it goes from a colorful to non-colorful rather than, you know, what you'd expect. We put a 0.01 on the density, and then we will most likely have to look at this light, because this light is also helping that volume to build up a lot. Let's just go into the light itself. We're going to, you know, reset the rotation. I am going to push the light around to this point and further, you know, a bit away, just so we can look at the scene development. So this is generating way too much, you know, we're generating way too much smoke. So what we're gonna do is reduce that emitter size to maybe like a 75. Put this to maybe like a 2. Actually, no, 3 was fine. Push this a bit further down. I think the wind pushing it too far up, maybe like a 0.4. I think I may have decreased this height resolution too much. And we can always play with the pivot. So if we think the pivot is, sorry, I think a minus 0.05 is probably going to be better. No? Let's see. 1 isn't good either. 0.5. So what we want to do, we're going to keep that in the shadow as it sort of envelops this scene here, okay? But I think before we sort of move on to do this in any particular, you know, in any further way, and developing it even further, we're gonna have to do the camera work and things like that before we can develop it more. I think the magnitude is definitely too big as well. But yeah, that's kind of how you set up the Niagara effects and how you make them interact with the environment. And obviously there's a lot more to be done here for when we have a sequence in place. Also, as a final side note to this particular effect, if you turn off additive, then it won't be as sort of prominent. And also, if we go to the other one and we do the same thing, we you know, go in here and disable additive, you'll notice that it's sort of not appearing anymore, and that's because it's no longer using an additive sort of approach to work out its density. So it's going to be there, but a lot less visible. So in this particular case, you can probably leave this as additive, but then the second one, you know, the larger effect over here, we could, you know, deactivate the additive point, but then increase its density, so maybe a 0.07 or something like that. And what you'll notice now is that we're going to get a sort of a nicer effect that's going to blend with the scene a bit more. But again, this is going to be part of us working out with the resolution, working with the emission of what we want that to look like, because right now it's not exactly, you know, amazing. So the resolution is definitely having an effect. We could probably do that 0.1 just to make it more visible, but then I would definitely go from like a 300 to a 500 resolution or something like that for the final effect. So you're noticing now, you know, higher resolution effect, hitting our meshes over here, and we don't really have a good light setup for it. But you can notice, you'll notice how this builds up the scene. And because it's no longer additive, it doesn't create as many artifacts. And this is the same thing with the other one. Like if we remove additive on the other effect, but instead increase its density, then we are not going to get any particular problems with the effect. So I've just put the density to 1 there. So now you're able to notice it, and it's going to look better, you know, as a release of the smoke. But it's really, I mean, again, this is about you toying around with the settings until you get what you want, and this could take a while to work this one out, right? It's not as easy as just clicking a few buttons and then it will work. You just have to play around with the settings.